On today's episode, we're out here in Southern California taking a look at the recently refreshed 2017 Toyota Corolla. For 2017, some of the biggest changes are cosmetic. We get the new front end look, new back end look, and a new dashboard on the inside. The engine and transmission under the hood remain the same as last year, but for 2017, Toyota is now being very aggressive with their new safety packages, and all models of the Corolla, including the base model, will come standard with radar adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assistance, pedestrian detection, pre-collision braking, etc. Up front, we see the biggest exterior change. We get some revised headlamps and a greatly revised front bumper. The overall opening here mimics what we see in the Toyota Highlander and some of the other Toyota models. The previous generation curved in just a little bit more. We also have some additional LED modules right here down the side of the front, and overall it looks a little bit more cohesive with the rest of the Toyota lineup. All models have a larger and slightly glossier Toyota logo because the radar adaptive cruise control sensor has to go somewhere. Because the 2017 Corolla is more of a refresh than a redesign, the length stays the same at just over 183 inches long. That means this is still one of the larger entries in this segment. Only the Dodge Dart was really longer, and of course it's going to be canceled very soon. This is a hair longer than the Honda Civic, but overall the Civic and the Corolla are very comparable in terms of size. Very much like Honda Civic, but unlike some entries in this segment, you can tell that there was definitely a family-focused mission with the Corolla. We have a very large rear window, which means it's easier for kids to see out of the back. There's also a little bit more headroom in the rear because of this more traditional profile right here in the back. Out back, the rear end of the Corolla has also been subtly refreshed in order to make this look a little bit different than the 2016 model year. Let me know what you think about the overall design of the Corolla down there in the comment section down below. The only change under the hood for 2017 is that we no longer have a 4-speed automatic in the base Corolla. The other difference is that you can't get the 6-speed manual transmission in the base Corolla either. Things actually start out with a continuously variable transmission as standard equipment. You don't have to pay extra for one. The base engine is a 1.8-liter 4-cylinder engine producing 132 horsepower and 128 pound-feet of torque. If you opt for the Eco model, then you actually get a little bit more power up to 140 and a little less torque at 126. Fuel economy is the lowest in the 6-speed manual-equipped Corolla, and if you get the CVT like we're driving right here, it will range between 31 and 34 depending on your trim level. Front seat comfort is good in the Corolla. We have a tilt telescopic steering column with a small range of motion, and the front seats themselves are a very comfortable design, although they're not quite as adjustable as some of the competition. Our model does not have power seats, but multi-way adjustable power seats are available. Rear seat comfort is relatively good for this segment, although headroom is limited back here. If I sit upright in the back seat, my head is touching the ceiling. Part of that is because the rear seat bottom cushions are a little bit higher off the floor. That actually makes them more comfortable for adults on the other hand. Moving over to the center seat position, it's a little bit higher off the ground, so my head is still definitely touching the ceiling. Moving all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, where this front seat was all the way back in its tracks, I still have about 3 inches of legroom left, so you can see how big the Corolla really has gotten in these latest generations. As you'd expect from a compact sedan, the rear seats do fold down, but they don't fold flat with the cargo area in the back because the cargo area is actually quite a bit lower than these seat backs. Cargo capacity for the Corolla is a little bit above average for this particular segment, and the trunk is nice and deep. That allows us to put 22-inch roller bags in this position and still close the trunk lid. Now the trunk is not quite as deep as we see in the Nissan Sentra for 2017, or quite as large as we see in the Chevy Cruze, but it is a very practical shape because it's very square. The wheel wells don't really have much of an impact on the shape of the Corolla's trunk, and that allows us to put several of these roller bags across the trunk, and you can actually put them in this upright position and push them all the way back against the rear seat backs. As we take a look around the interior, we are in an LE Eco model with the premium package, so we do have a sunroof up there. We have cloth seats and height-adjustable seat belts for the driver and the front passenger. Unlike some entries in this segment, the majority of the door panels are cast from hard plastic, so the black portion upper, black portion of the mid, and of course the lower portion of the door, those are all hard touch plastics. Really the only soft touch area we get is this insert right here and the armrest. The big change for 2017 is this revised dashboard. We have a soft touch injection molded upper portion of the dashboard, soft pleather right here in this middle section, and then actually another section of soft touch plastic depending on the model you get. The model we're in does not have that, but the upper level trims would actually replace this part with a stitched pleather piece. Moving over to the center of the dashboard, we find 2 air vents, a digital clock that is separate from the infotainment system, and then the infotainment system itself. In our particular model, we have the 6.1-inch color touchscreen infotainment system. Corolla offers available navigation, but this particular model does not have it. Below the infotainment and navigation system, we have our single-zone automatic climate control, then a 12-volt power port, USB input, and auxiliary input. The Corolla uses a console shifter. It's a gated variety, so it actually wiggles side to side as it goes all the way to the back to drive. Because we're in the LE Eco model, we have drive down there, we have sport over here, and then we click it further down for the engine braking mode. If we were in one of the sportier trims of the Corolla, moving over to the left from drive would engage the sport mode just as we see here, but then it would allow us to toggle the shifter up and down in order to manually change gear ratios. Those models would also include shift paddles on the back of the steering wheel. Continuing down from that, we have a traditional handbrake, the button to enable and disable the traction control, and an Eco mode button, along with 2 large cup holders. Between the front seats, we find a padded center console. It's fabric coated in our particular model. It opens to reveal a 2-tiered storage cubby. There's a small tray right here, and then it opens to reveal a moderately sized storage cubby. Definitely find a little bit more room in some of the competition. The instrument cluster gets a mild revision for 2017, primarily because we now have that radar adaptive cruise control system. So when we engage the system, we now have this display right here in the center to show that it's engaged. It's a black and white display towards the bottom, but does have these little color icons right up there at the top. In addition to giving you your usual trip computer information, this will also show the status of the vehicle's safety systems like the radar adaptive cruise control and the lane departure assistance system. The steering wheel changes a little bit from model to model. Again, we are in the LE Eco model, so we don't have the shift pedals on the back of the steering wheel. We still have sport grips right up top, and it is a 3-spoke design. You'll find the controls for the infotainment system over here on the left, volume up, down, track forward, backward, the mode button, and a mute button right over there. And on the right side of the steering wheel, we find the new buttons for this year, which would be the lane departure button, and of course the distance control button for that radar adaptive cruise control system. You'll still find the cruise control buttons themselves right here on the stock. There's a voice command button, the display button controls that multifunction display right there, and then we have phone hang up and pickup. The Corolla is a vehicle that sells on Toyota's reputation for reliability, dependability, and of course a very, very strong value proposition, especially because of all the advanced safety features we get standard in the model, and the fact that we get a standard automatic transmission in the base model of the Corolla. The Corolla does not necessarily, however, sell on performance or handling, because this is one of the slower entries in this particular segment. The model that we're driving ran from 0 to 60 in 8.9 seconds, which is on the slower end of the scale. The most direct competitor to the Corolla would be the Honda Civic, of course, and both engines available in the Civic will go from 0 to 60 faster than this. The regular naturally aspirated engine will be a little bit faster than this, and the turbocharged optional engine in the Civic will be considerably faster than this. When it comes to our braking score, we ran from 60 to 0 in 130 feet, and at this point I should remind you that these are preliminary scores. We have not had the opportunity to test this on our own home test track, so these numbers may change when we can get our hands on one for a full week. That said, 130 feet is pretty average for this segment, so I don't expect that particular score to change too much. We are driving the ostensibly sportier SE trim of the Corolla right now, and although it is a little bit more buttoned down than the regular Corolla, the suspension feels a little bit firmer, the steering is definitely very numb. There are a variety of mainstream competitors that are going to be more fun than the Corolla out on winding mountain roads. The Civic, the Elantra, they all have a more communicative feel, especially in the steering. And of course, we have the Mazda 3 in this particular segment. If you're after the most driving enjoyment, the Mazda 3 is likely going to be the model for you. Although handling may trail the competition, that does not necessarily mean that the Corolla handles poorly, because this is going to handle better than a variety of subcompacts or hybrids that I could mention. As I've mentioned before, ride and handling can be two ends of the teeter-totter, and the Corolla does seem to put a slightly larger emphasis on the ride. This is one of the more plush rides in this particular segment. It's also one of the more forgiving when you're out here on winding mountain roads that are definitely poorly paved. This generation of the Corolla is also quieter than Corollas of the past. We scored 71 decibels in this cabin at 50 miles an hour. That is one of the quieter cabins in this particular segment. Something like a Mazda 3 may be more fun to drive out on the road, but certain versions will actually be louder as well. As you'd expect from a compact car with a modern CVT under the hood, fuel economy is excellent. We've been averaging between 35 and 36 miles per gallon, which is very similar to what we see in the Honda Civic. That's actually a little bit higher than the EPA score for this model. Keep in mind, of course, that 2017 has brought a change to the way that EPA fuel economy scores are calculated, and most vehicles in this segment have lost 1 to 2 miles per gallon, depending on exactly where they landed in the 2016 cycle. If you get the LE Eco trim of the Corolla, then you'll get slightly better fuel economy, although the delta between the two models is not really that large. The interesting thing, of course, with the LE Eco is that it actually gets a hair more power than the regular Corolla, but don't get too excited. 0 to 60 times are just about the same. We didn't notice any difference in 0 to 60 time between the SE and the LE Eco model in our preliminary tests out here in Southern California. The Corolla may not be the most exciting corner carver available in the compact sedan segment, but the level of feature content that we get in the Corollas is very high. As I said earlier, we get radar adaptive cruise control in every model of the Corolla. This is quite unique in this particular segment. Bundled with the radar adaptive cruise control system is the lane keeping assistance system, the lane departure warning system, autonomous braking, which will attempt to stop the car if it thinks you're going to run into another car, and that system also has pedestrian detection to keep you from running down those pedestrians that are crossing the road. At this moment in time, that makes the Corolla easily the least expensive available in America with that group of features. You can, of course, get a base Honda Civic with the Honda Sensing package, but that's going to cost you about $2,000 more than a Corolla. For 2017, the Corolla starts at $18,500. This is very close to the 2016 price, even though we have a great deal more standard equipment. The two big changes for the base L trim of the Corolla are that we now have the continuously variable transmission standard, and that means that fuel economy and performance are better than the L trim for 2016, even though the engine is still the same. We also have revised LED headlamps with better nighttime performance, the standard 6.1-inch touchscreen infotainment system with the backup camera, and the big thing, of course, is the fact that radar adaptive cruise control, pre-collision braking with pedestrian detection, the lane departure prevention system, and auto high beams are all standard in the L model as well. In something of an unusual move for a mainstream car manufacturer, Toyota has recently said that they're going to put their active safety systems in all of their models over the next few years as standard equipment, not as optional equipment like we see in most of the competition. Which safety system ends up in which car is something that we don't quite know yet. However, it is very interesting that this level of safety system is going into the $18,500 Toyota Corolla. Radar adaptive cruise control is not very common in this compact car segment, and it is unusual to see it as a standard feature in something like the Corolla. The delta between the L model and the LE model is fairly small because, as you'll see in this chart, there isn't that much extra equipment that we get from hopping from the L to the LE because Toyota has made so much of this standard for that low base price. Stepping up to the XLE trim gets you soft tech seats. You'll notice that's not leather, that's Toyota's imitation leather, which they claim is more environmentally friendly. We also get things like the power driver's seat, the keyless entry and go, but we don't get factory navigation like we see in some other entries in this segment. Instead, we get smartphone integrated navigation. That means that there's an app that runs on your Android device or your iPhone, and it connects to the car, and then you see turn-by-turn directions on the touchscreen in the dashboard, but the brain behind the navigation is actually your connected smartphone. On the other side of the chart, you see the sporty trims of the Corolla, and those start with the SE at $20,445. It gets that unique look, it gets unique wheels, unique seats, etc. The SE is trying to give the Corolla shopper the option to have a little bit more interior and exterior flair. It also gives you the option of a manual transmission, but you do have to pay extra for it. As we dive into the comparison section, there are two things to keep in mind. The first thing is that the compact sedan segment is incredibly competitive. So a lot of the vehicles really end up being very similarly priced once you start factoring in value, standard features on one versus standard features on the other. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is a large segment, so we will only really be talking about the top 4 competitors that the Corolla competes with. And that would be the Honda Civic, which is the best-selling entry in this segment, the Sentra, the Focus, and the Hyundai Elantra. Before we dive into specific comparisons, let's talk about how the Corolla fits in the general landscape. As far as this segment goes, 132 horsepower is on the lower end of the segment, but it is substantially similar to what we see in the Sentra and in certain versions of the Elantra. I've tossed the brand new Cruise on this chart, even though we won't really be talking too much about the Cruise because it is kind of an unusual entry in this segment. The brand new redesigned Cruise starts out with a 1.4-liter turbocharged engine in kind of an unusual twist, but it's also going to be offering a 1.6-liter diesel engine, and it's going to be the only diesel in this segment now that Volkswagen has really put the lid on the diesel Jetta. It should be very obvious on this chart that Toyota is not really chasing performance shoppers even with the SE trims of the Corolla. The SE trim is trying to give you a sportier look, a different interior theme, something that makes your car a little bit more unique than the regular run-of-the-mill Corolla, but they're not really targeting something like a Honda Civic Turbo. On first glance, the Corolla may appear to be a little bit more expensive than other entries in this segment at $18,500, because the Elantra does start at $17,150. However, that's a manual transmission Elantra. If you want the automatic, you'll pay $1,000 extra. Likewise, the Ford Focus starts at $17,225, but again, no automatic transmission in that model. You'll have to pay $18,320 in order to get the automatic. And if you want your Ford Focus more or less comparably equipped to the base L trim of the Corolla, it'll actually set you back $19,390. The one entry in this segment that is definitely less expensive than the Corolla is the Nissan Sentra. It starts at $16,780. Adding the automatic transmission brings it up to $17,990, and you're probably going to find a better deal at the Nissan lot than at the Toyota lot. However, value is still a big win for the Corolla, because when you take a look at the standard feature content you get on the Corolla, you get more than $1,000 of extra gadgets and gizmos that you don't find on the Sentra. Things really start differentiating when you take a look at the active safety systems that we see in the base model of the Corolla. You can add them to the Nissan Sentra, but they will set you back $25,065 because you can only get them in the SR trim and the SL trim, but oddly enough, you cannot get them in the SR Turbo trim of the Sentra. Things are somewhat similar over on the Honda Civic. It is one of the more expensive base entries in this particular segment, although it does come very competitively equipped. On the downside, it does not come with an automatic transmission. It is a manual transmission standard. If you want the continuously variable transmission, it will then be $1,000 more than the Corolla. And if you want the radar adaptive cruise control and active safety package, which you can get on the base model of the Civic, it will be $2,000 more than a Corolla. That's a 10% price difference. Honda has been surprisingly aggressive with the Civic. They've been redesigning it regularly, they've been stuffing more and more feature content into even the base models of the Civic, and they surprised everybody by offering their Honda Sensing package in even the base trim of the Civic. Of course, Toyota has really upped the ante in the 2017 Corolla because they're making their radar adaptive cruise control and safety package standard, not optional, in the base L Corolla. Outside of standard equipment and value, the Civic is the better handling option. It also has better performance if you get the 1.5-liter turbocharged versions of the Civic. If you're taking a look at the top-end trims of the Corolla versus top-end trims of the Civic, you'll get much better performance and actually better fuel economy as well in the Honda than the Corolla because there is that optional engine. There's also the top-end touring trim of the Civic, which gives you features you just don't find in the Corolla. And finally, we have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto integration, which really gives a better experience in the cabin than the smartphone integrated navigation that you do see in top-end trims of the Corolla. Of course, the biggest difference between the two is going to be the way that they drive. The Honda Civic is much more engaging, and it's considerably better handling than the Toyota Corolla, even though Toyota has really worked on that for this generation of the Corolla. The big caveat here, of course, is that although I find the Civic to be the superior vehicle, it also has the superior price tag. The Civic doesn't come with an automatic transmission standard, even though most shoppers will want one in this segment. It also doesn't have the radar adaptive cruise control or the safety package that we see in the Corolla standard either. That means if you want to get those options in your base Civic LX, you can, but you'll pay at least $2,000 more than you will at the Toyota dealer. Nissan Sentra is a little bit interesting in this particular segment because they were the value leader by far, and now the difference is not quite as clear as it used to be. The Sentra is still less expensive than a Toyota Corolla, so if you're simply looking for a vehicle this size with the lowest price tag, the Sentra is still going to be the winner. But when you start taking a look at feature content available in the Sentra, available in the Corolla, standard in the Sentra, standard in the Corolla really starts to win. In terms of general handling dynamics and performance, the Sentra and the Corolla are not really very far off. They produce about the same amount of power from their similarly sized engines, and they both have continuously variable transmissions. Nissan has been pretty aggressive at driving down some of the features we typically found in larger cars into the Sentra, but Toyota really takes the cake here. If you're after some of those advanced safety features, you can find them in the Sentra, but you will find them in the Sentra considerably higher priced than we find them in the Corolla. Now that said, Nissan has introduced a twist for 2017 with the all-new turbocharged Sentra SR. For about the same price as a Corolla XLE, you can get the Sentra SR with 188 horsepower under the hood. The Ford Focus is not one of the freshest entries in this particular segment, but it is one of the more interesting because Ford offers a wider variety of customization in that vehicle than anybody else in this segment. There are a ton of different engines to choose from several different turbocharged engines, high horsepower turbocharged engines, the 3-cylinder 1-liter turbocharged engine. You can get the manual transmission in a wider variety of engines. There's just a higher level of personalization that you can do in that vehicle than any of the other entries that we see here. Of course, that customization will definitely cost you because when you start working your way up the option ladder, the Ford Focus will actually be more expensive than a Toyota Corolla when comparably equipped. We also don't see anything along the lines of the Toyota Safety Sensing package in those low-end trims. When comparably equipped, the Ford Focus is going to be the better handling vehicle, the better accelerating vehicle, the better braking vehicle, just all around a more engaging driving machine, but the Toyota Corolla is likely going to be more reliable. It's also going to be a slightly better value. Our last direct comparison is the Hyundai Elantra. As I said earlier, it has a very low starting price, but by the time you add the automatic transmission, it's only going to be a few $100s apart from the Corolla. Of course, the Toyota Corolla does have that advanced safety package standard on it, but the Elantra fights back with the longest warranty in this particular segment, and the value of that warranty is something important to keep in mind. The Elantra is one of the newest entries in this segment, and it really shows when you take a look at the cabin and the exterior of the vehicle. I think that overall styling, the Elantra is one of the more attractive options, and the cabin is definitely one of the more premium as far as comparing base model to base model. The problem with the Elantra tends to be when you work your way up the option ladder and you start taking a look at those top-end trims of the Elantra, it doesn't feel quite as premium as certain versions of the Civic or even the Ford Focus. Real-world fuel economy is also something that Hyundai has struggled with, and the Elantra is no different. Even though it's rated for an identical 32 miles per gallon versus most mainstream models of the Corolla, you'll probably get better fuel economy in the Corolla in real-world driving. The standard feature content we get in the base model, as well as that safety package, really makes the $18,500 Corolla a hard deal to beat at that end of the scale. If, however, you're shopping around $21,000, then I would take the Elantra Eco over the Corolla. The 7-speed dual-clutch transmission is just more engaging than anything we find in the Corolla. Even though the fuel economy is not going to be quite as good as the high-economy versions of the Corolla, it's going to be an awful lot more fun in the Elantra. You won't find the safety packages in the Elantra at that price point, but I think I would give it up for the added driving excitement. My top picks in this segment really depend on your budget. That may sound a little bit silly at first, but remember that there is a pretty big percentage difference between a base Nissan Sentra and a $26,000 Honda Civic. If your budget stretches between about $18,000 and about $21,000, the Corolla is going to be a much better buy than the other entries in this segment. And I would say even at the bottom end of the segment, if you can stretch yourself up into that $18,500 Corolla, I would take that over most of the entries in this segment, mostly because of that advanced safety package. It's not going to be quite as engaging to drive, but it just might help save your bacon. My bottom line in the compact sedan segment is that the Honda Civic is still my winner for 2017, but the Corolla really makes some very good arguments for why you should buy the Toyota over the Honda Civic, and value is incredibly important in this particular segment. However, the handling ability, the performance ability that we get out of the Honda Civic with that turbocharged engine really push it over the edge for me. But it's really hard to go wrong with the Corolla for 2017, and that's not something I could say about the 2016 model year Corolla. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes. Be sure and hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of the screen. Check out those related videos on the side of the screen. You can find us over at facebook.com. You can also find us over at patreon.com if you want to help support this channel. I'll see you next week.